Self-doubt is not the absence of confidence. It's that there's something weighing down your natural state of confidence. Here's what I mean. I see time and time again in the personal development space that in order for you to overcome self-doubt, you've got to build up more confidence to overpower the self-doubt. And while that might be an effective strategy for 1% of the population, what I've found in my experience is that overwhelming self-doubt with confidence requires a significant amount of muscle. You've got to use a huge amount of force to get there, and you've got to be consistent with it. You've got to push really hard. And after a long period of time, you might find that even then, the self-doubt continues to show up. So when I was wrestling with my own self-doubt many years ago, I was trying to work out, well, how do I address self-doubt when it comes up? Because I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to completely eliminate it from my life. So I ventured off on a quest to work out what it was that was at the core of my own self-doubt, because I figured if I was able to work that out for myself, maybe I could help some other people with it too. Here's what I found, that self-doubt isn't the absence of confidence. It's actually the presence of something bigger weighing down your confidence. And what I mean by that is your confidence and your sense of self-worth and self-belief are like a life raft, an inflatable life raft. And if we attach concrete anchors to this life raft throughout your life, it will weigh down the life raft enough to pull it beneath the surface of the water. Now, modern pop psychology and mindset techniques are to try and lift the life raft up, force it up to the surface of the water and hold it there with all different kinds of techniques in an attempt to overpower the self-doubt. But the self-doubt in this case is all these concrete anchors attached to the life raft. And so what we wrestle with is, how do we create sustainable buoyancy? How are we able to continue to stay buoyant throughout life's challenges and storms and difficulties? That's really difficult when you've got these heavy concrete anchors attached to the life raft. So instead of trying to use force to try and hold this life raft up, my preference is to work out why the concrete anchors were attached in the first place and then cut them. Because when we cut these concrete anchors, the natural buoyancy of this life raft, this is your self-belief, your self-worth, and your confidence, naturally lifts the life raft up to the surface of the ocean again. And then it requires no effort whatsoever. It just happens all on its own. You don't have to use force. You don't have to try and overpower it. It just shows up. So these different anchors that are weighing you down, these are stories that you've developed at some point in your life that have been burdening you, that you've been struggling with. And so as a result, you're assuming that these stories are true. You're believing them and you're giving them more weight. And as a result, it weighs down and overwhelms the buoyancy of your life raft. So the question is, how do we work out what these stories are and where do they trace back to? Because the moment we become aware of whatever the story is that we developed at whatever age, we suddenly shed a light on why it is we keep coming up against this overwhelming sense of self-doubt at particular moments in our lives. And I'll give you a little bit of a secret, which isn't really a secret, in that whenever you come up against something that's new or something that you perceive to be difficult, your self-doubt will probably kick in. And that's a natural response because you might not have experience navigating that. So naturally, you'll have doubt about your competence and your skill set navigating that particular challenge. That's not the problem though. The problem is the story that you tell yourself about the incompetence. I'm incompetent. I don't have the skill set to be able to do that. So therefore, this will be bad. This will be painful. I will humiliate myself. I will experience failure, and failure is bad. I will experience setbacks, and setbacks are bad. I will embarrass myself. Whatever the story is that you're carrying about, whatever the circumstances are, that's what's weighing you down, not the circumstance itself, not the actual lack of skill or incompetence that you have going into something as a newbie or experiencing it for the first time. That's not the problem at all. It's the story that you tell yourself about that seeds the self-doubt. So an example I like to use is when I was writing my book years ago. Every time I'd sit down and start writing out my draft, I'd experience all this self-doubt. And the inner dialogue was usually something along the lines of, who do you think you are to write a book? What makes you an expert? What do you know about writing a book? How could you possibly put this together? Who's going to read this book? I had all these different stories of self-doubt. And whenever I sat down to write, I would try to overpower the stories and push past it. And it worked. It was slow. It required a lot of procrastination. I would drag my feet. I would feel really crappy about it, but I'd sit there and I'd write as much as I could to sort of overpower this story. But it slowed me down. Every time I went to sit down and write another chapter, the stories would come in, and it felt like every time those stories would return, they would come with extra force and extra muscle. And so it became really fatiguing for me to navigate my way through these stories long enough to write another chapter. So there was one day where I was especially tired. I had finished a full day of work and I intended on writing another chapter of my book. And I thought, I don't have it in me to try and overcome these stories and try and overpower all this self-doubt. So instead, I grabbed a blank piece of paper and I started writing out all the different stories that were coming up for me, that I have no right writing a book. I've got no experience doing this. Who's going to want to read my book? What makes me an expert? And instead of resisting every single one of those stories, I actually acknowledged and agreed with each of them, because these stories that were coming up had truth in them. I had never written a book before that. And what made me an expert? What made me worthy of writing and publishing a book? Who was going to read this book? I had no idea. So instead of resisting the doubt, I actually leaned right in and said, okay, well, there are things here to explore. So what are my answers to some of these queries? Who am I to be writing a book? So I wrote down an answer for each of the stories of self-doubt. Who are you to write a book? Well, I'm Giorgio Genis. I literally wrote that down. Okay, then who are you to be writing a book? What makes you an expert? And I wrote down, well, I'm not an expert. I just have experience in this field. And I'm sharing what I've experienced with clients and what I've worked on within myself with other people in this book. Okay, that's a pretty solid answer. And I just kept going. I just kept writing for each of them. And what I found was that as I had an answer for each of the experiences of self-doubt, especially when I was coming from the angle of agreeance rather than resisting it, the self-doubt calmed down significantly. And where it got really interesting was when I was done agreeing with all of the self-doubt and listing out answers for each and every one of the stories I had, the next time I sat down to write another chapter, it just came out of me. There was no wrestling with self-doubt, trying to pin it to the floor long enough to be able to hit a few keys on my keyboard. None of that happened. I was just able to sit down and write without the interference of this self-doubt. But then when I got into the editing stage of the book, once the draft and the manuscript was finished, a new layer of self-doubt started to show up because the book was becoming more real and I was having to be very thorough in reviewing my writing. So there was criticisms that were coming up and self-doubt about my writing style. And so I had to do the same exercise to reduce the pain of rereading the draft of my book because it was, at the time, 170,000 words. So again, I sat down and started addressing the self-doubt and the criticism with agreeance, and it started to dissolve, which helped me continue with the project. And I found that to be true with every project that I work on or any challenge that I attempt to tackle in my life and in my business. I'm usually coming up against a lot of self-doubt when I'm stepping into an arena that I have little experience in or that I'm doing for the first time. That's not the problem. The problem is what I do in the face of the doubt and the uncertainty. So instead of trying to develop a sense of self-belief in that I can do anything, I don't know if I can do anything because I haven't done everything. Instead, I'd rather wholeheartedly believe that I can face the doubt and I can face the uncertainty. So my self-belief comes from, I know that I can face whatever the story is that comes up. I don't know if I'll be successful in what I do. I don't know if I'll be what some people consider a winner. I don't know if I'm going to make the right decisions. I actually don't know. Time will tell, and I'll need to go and experience those things, collect the evidence, and then find out and learn. So instead of trying to solve the lack of competence or the incompetence with positive self-talk, I'd rather just address the issue at the heart of it and say, well, the truth is, I don't know what I'm doing. It's the first time I'm doing it, but I trust that I can work through whatever the stories are that are coming up. I can question them. I can kind of clear the fog with my critical thinking and my clear thinking, and then find my way through it no matter which way this goes. Instead of trying to force it to go in a particular way, i.e. success, I'd rather just address whatever the challenge is, find my way through it, and arrive at wherever I'm meant to arrive at, learn whatever it is I need to learn, and then continue from there. So with all the experience I've had over the years of coaching leaders and entrepreneurs and business owners, high performers all around the world, every single one of them have come to me with self-doubt. Some that you would be surprised that experience self-doubt. They feel comfortable enough and safe enough with me to share that. And I don't instill a sense of confidence in them that I believe in them and they've got everything they need, because that'll last the length of our call. And then the moment the call ends, they slip back into self-doubt. So instead, what I get them to do is I get them to look at the evidence of their life that whenever they faced something that they had uncertainty with or a lack of experience with, I would have them look at what they chose to do in the face of that and what result they ended up experiencing. And inevitably what they find, and this is probably true for you, when you face something you don't know how to do, you've probably tried to do it anyway. And just the attempt in trying, regardless of knowing how it was going to go, that helped you form a sense of confidence and a sense of self-belief. Even though you had no idea which way it was going to go, it's almost as if the moment you initiate the action, there's a sense of self-belief that kicks into gear because you find that you've initiated momentum and I'm willing to try and find out, let's go work it out. And that can make all the difference because it breaks you out of the inertia cycle where you just get stuck, spinning your wheels, not doing anything, not making any progress whatsoever. And the biggest thing that I see people struggling with that come into my life is that they feel like they've lost momentum. Life was going, it was moving, and then some things have happened. Doubt came up, they got a bit rattled, they got thrown off and a little bit wobbly in life and in their thinking. And then before they know it, they lost momentum, they lost steam. So the best way to break that cycle is to look at the evidence you've got of what you've been able to do in spite of uncertainty, in spite of having self-doubt. And you'll find that it wasn't that you just pushed through and you found a way to do it. It was that you were willing to find a way regardless of how the circumstances unfolded. And that is what creates a sense of confidence. That's the equivalent of starting to drop some of these concrete anchors without going into the depths of how I would actually shift some of the deeper things. That is probably the most effective thing that you can start doing today to help you step into that natural sense of confidence that exists without you having to try and force the life raft to the surface of the water. So spend some time doing that. Spend some time reflecting on what it is that you are telling yourself about these stories, what these stories are, what it says about you that you're struggling, and what you'll find, inevitably, is that they're just stories. There's no truth behind them. And when you realize they're stories that are keeping you stuck where you are, you get to start rewriting that story. So don't try and outmuscle your self-doubt. Instead, address it, own it, agree with it, and then answer to it. And you'll find that will help the self-doubt calm down and the natural confidence and self-worth that you have will rise again with its own buoyancy. And that will carry you through further than any management or coping techniques to try and help force doubt into the corner to sit down. My hope is that this was useful to you and that you've been able to get some insight and something to reflect on in your own life. Now, if you found this topic useful, make sure you go and check out this video where I talk about how your past is actually holding you back from the future that you're trying to create. I'll see you there.